Let me tell you about a Thursday afternoon in March. A conference room on the 14th floor of a building in downtown Phoenix. Floor-to-ceiling windows. The kind of bland, neutral decor that law offices favor: beige carpet, dark wood table chairs that are comfortable enough to suggest professionalism, but not so comfortable that anyone lingers. 6 people at the table. My son Garrett, who is 42 years old, and who had driven from Scottsdale in a car I had never seen before, new expensive, the kind of car a man buys when he believes a large sum of money is about to become available to him. His wife, Tiffany, 40, who had dressed for the occasion in the specific way of someone who considers a reading of the will a kind of social event requiring appropriate presentation. My daughter, Claire, 38, who had driven from Flagstaff in her actual car, a 7-year-old Honda with a dent in the rear quarter panel that she had not gotten around to fixing, and who was sitting with her hands folded on the table and her face carefully arranged into the expression she uses when she is paying close attention and does not want to reveal what she is thinking. Claire's husband, Marcus, who was there for support and who had the good sense to remain almost entirely silent throughout what followed. Myself. 67-years-old widow of Howard Kellerman, who had died 4 months earlier after 51 years of marriage, and a heart that had given out not dramatically, but quietly, the way Howard did most things on a Tuesday morning in November while he was reading the newspaper in the kitchen and I was in the garden. And our estate attorney, Philip Marsh, who had been Howard's lawyer for 22 years, and who is one of those people whose face reveals very little when they are doing their job, which is exactly the quality you want in an estate attorney at the moment of a reading. Philip opened the folder. He said, "I'll begin with the summary of assets, and then we'll go through the specific dispositions." Garrett leaned forward slightly. He had a particular quality about him that morning, the quality of a man who has been told repeatedly and with confidence by the voice in his own head that what is about to happen will be good for him. He had mentioned at the brief family breakfast, before the appointment 3 times in different phrasings, how much he was looking forward to being able to help Mum with the estate, which was his way of indicating that he expected to be centrally involved in whatever was coming. Philip read the summary of assets. The house on Camelback, the one Howard and I had bought in 1989 for $210,000, and that had sat in the Phoenix real estate market for 34 years and was now valued at $890,000. Howard's investment portfolio, which Philip described as consisting of equities, bonds, and certain real estate investment trusts that Howard had been building quietly, methodically for 30 years, and which had a current value of approximately $1,340,000. A small rental property in Mesa that Howard had purchased in 2004 for reasons that had seemed modest at the time and had in the intervening 2 decades appreciated to a value of $380,000. Liquid assets, savings, and money market accounts totaling approximately $147,000. Total estate value approximately $2,757,000. I want to tell you about the silence that followed Philip's reading of that number, because Garrett had spent considerable time across the years of Howard's decline and then death, explaining to various family members, and according to Claire, to various people at his country club, that his father's estate was modest, that there was the house, a little in savings, nothing major, that any inheritance would be symbolic more than substantial. He had said this with the authority of a man who believes he knows his parents' finances. He had been wrong by approximately $2 million. The silence lasted perhaps 4 seconds. Then Philip said, "Mr. Kellerman's will, executed 18 months before his death, and modified in certain respects 7 months before his death, makes the following dispositions." Garrett straightened in his chair. Philip read, "The house on Camelback to Vivian Kellerman outright and in full. The investment portfolio to Vivian Kellerman outright and in full, with the express instruction that she distribute it as she sees fit among her heirs and beneficiaries at such time and in such manner as she alone determines. The rental property in Mesa to Vivian Kellerman outright and in full. the liquid assets to Vivian Kellerman outright and in full. Any and all remaining personal property assets and interests to Vivian Kellerman outright and in full. Philip paused. He looked at the room over the tops of his reading glasses. That concludes the disposition of the estate, he said. Garrett stared at Philip. Then he looked at me. I looked back at him. I thought about a dinner table 14 months earlier, where Garrett had looked at me across the plates and said, laughing in the way he laughed when he wanted something to sound like a joke, but meant it as a statement. Mum, let's be realistic. You've got the house. You don't have to pretend there's some fortune hidden somewhere. I had not responded to that. I had simply smiled. He had laughed a little more and moved on to a different subject. I thought about that dinner table on Thursday afternoon in the conference room on the 14th floor. I looked at my son. I did not smile because this was not a moment for smiling. Howard would not have smiled either. He would have been very still the way he was when something serious was happening. But I thought about that dinner table, and I understood in a way I had not entirely permitted myself to understand before how completely my husband had seen what I had seen, and how completely he had prepared for it. My name is Vivian. I am 67 years old. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, in a house that my husband Howard and I bought when we were 33 years old, and that I now own entirely, which still does not feel entirely real. I was a registered nurse for 30 years, specializing in oncology, which means I spent my career walking beside people through the hardest passage there is, and which has given me a very particular understanding of what matters and what doesn't, and a very low tolerance for the kinds of small vanities and social performances that consume a great deal of human energy that could be better spent. Howard was a structural engineer. He worked for the same firm for 28 years, and then at 55 went independent, which was a terrifying decision that turned out to be one of the best he ever made. He was a quiet man, not shy, not avoidant, but genuinely comfortable with silence in a way that not everyone is. He had the specific intelligence of someone who reads everything and synthesizes it slowly and arrives at conclusions that are almost always correct and almost always unexpected. He also had, from the time our children were in high school, a private investment practice that no one in the family knew about in its full dimension. Not because he was hiding it, because it was his. Because Howard believed firmly without apology that his financial life was his own, that what he built through 30 years of careful patient investing was a private achievement that he would share with me and deploy for our family's benefit in the way he chose. He chose carefully, he chose wisely, and he chose in the last 18 months of his life to make certain that what he had built would go to the person he trusted to use it well. I'll get to that. But first, let me tell you about our children. Claire is 38. She lives in Flagstaff, where she teaches high school mathematics and coaches the girls' soccer team. She married Marcus, who builds furniture by hand and sells it through a small shop and online, and makes a modest but genuine living doing something he loves. They have 2 daughters, Nina and Bea, who are 9 and 6. Claire calls on ordinary Sunday afternoons. She comes for holidays and stays in her old room and helps with dishes without being asked, and reads to Nina and Bea in the evenings in the particular warm voice she has used since she was a child herself, and used to read to me when I had long shifts. She is without question a good daughter. Not performatively good, actually good, in the way that is built into a person rather than displayed for observers. Garrett is 42. He lives in Scottsdale, which is the specific Scottsdale of country clubs and new construction, and a particular social register that prizes visible success above almost everything else. He works in financial services derivatives specifically, and makes a great deal of money, more than I know the exact amount of more than he needs, in the way that people who make a great deal of money in certain fields continue to need more of it because the amount itself has become the point. He married Tiffany 11 years ago. Tiffany is from a family of means in Scottsdale, and brings to every interaction the specific quality of someone who has always understood themselves to be in a certain category of people and monitors their position within that category carefully. I am not a cruel person. I want to be fair. Tiffany has qualities I respect. She is organized. She is direct. She is consistent. The problem is that her consistency is directed toward a set of values that I find it difficult to share, and that her directness, when it involves my family's finances or my son's expectations, has a quality that I find it difficult to be in the room with for extended periods. Garrett and Tiffany have no children, which they have indicated is a deliberate choice, and which I respect entirely. What I do not respect is what developed over the last several years of Howard's illness in Garrett's relationship with his parents and his parents' estate. Let me tell you about the development. Howard was diagnosed with congestive heart failure 5 years ago. He was 68. He had been healthy, active tennis twice a week, walking every morning, the discipline that had characterized everything he did. The diagnosis arrived, as these things do, from a routine appointment that revealed something abnormal that led to further testing, that produced a conversation with a cardiologist who drew a picture on a notepad and explained what was happening in Howard's heart with the careful clarity of a man who has had this conversation many times and understands that people need simplicity more than precision in these moments. We went home. We sat together. Howard was very quiet for a while, and then he said, "Well, that changes some planning. This is Howard." In 4 words, the full picture. The planning he referred to was not morbid or panicked. It was practical. He had always been practical. He made an appointment with Philip Marsh. He reviewed and updated his investment strategy. He made certain that I understood fully and completely the state of our finances, every account, every investment, every property, every insurance policy. He walked me through it all in a series of Sunday afternoon sessions over the course of a month, the way he had once walked junior engineers through project specifications, patient, thorough, expecting me to understand and capable of explaining it until I did. I had not known the full scope of what he had built. I knew we were comfortable. I knew the house was paid off. I knew Howard was careful with money in the way his Depression-era parents had raised him to be. I knew there was something in investments because he mentioned it occasionally. I did not know there was $1.34 million in a portfolio that had been quietly compounding for 30 years. When he showed me in the first of those Sunday afternoon sessions the current value of the investment accounts, I sat very still. "Howard," I said. "I know," he said. "When did—" "Gradually," he said. "1 account, then 2, then the reinvestment of returns, then the Mesa property in 2004. I never spent the principal. I reinvested everything. 30 years of reinvestment adds up." "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. He looked at me for a moment. "I told you about it," he said. "Many times. You knew there were investment accounts." "I didn't know they were—" "I know," he said. "I should have been more specific. I was protecting a habit of privacy that I should have shared more fully with you earlier. I'm sorry for that." Howard apologized precisely, and without excess. It was one of the things about him. "What happens now?" I said. "Now," he said, "we make sure everything is in order." Over the following year, Howard worked with Philip to update and refine the estate documents. What he arrived at, the will that Philip read on that Thursday afternoon in March, was the result of careful, deliberate thought about the people he was leaving behind and what he knew about each of them. He talked to me about it. Not about every detail. He wanted the specific terms to be his alone, the expression of his judgment about his own estate, but about the general shape of it. "Everything goes to you first," he said. "Outright. No conditions, no strings, no trust structure. You are the person I trust completely. After you, it goes where you decide to send it." "And the children," I said. He looked at me with the specific patience he reserved for questions he had already answered in his own mind. "You'll take care of the children," he said. "The ones who deserve to be taken care of." I understood what he meant. I understood, and I said nothing. because Howard's judgment, and my own, had over 51 years arrived at the same place on this question, and there was nothing more to say. The change in Garrett happened gradually, the way changes of this kind usually do. Before Howard's diagnosis, Garrett was simply Garrett. A son who called sporadically, visited for holidays when his schedule permitted, sent large and expensive gifts at Christmas that carried the specific quality of someone who is more comfortable with transactions than with time. He was not close to us in the deep sense, but he was present in the way that adult children with busy lives are present at the edges, at the occasions not entirely absent. After the diagnosis, something shifted. The calls became more frequent. The visits increased. He and Tiffany came to Phoenix more often, not for nothing. Not unreasonably, but with a quality that I noticed, and that Howard noticed, and that we discussed once quietly, late on a Sunday evening, in the specific tone we used for things we were naming carefully. "He's interested in the estate," Howard said. Not angrily, just precisely. "Yes," I said. "I expected it," he said. "I didn't," I said. "Not like this." Howard was quiet for a moment. "He's always calibrated his behavior to what he expected to receive," he said. "I think we both know that. It was always the thing about him." I thought about this. "We were never rich enough to bring it out fully," I said. "No," Howard said. "We weren't." He went back to his book. Over the following 2 years, the 2 years between the diagnosis and Howard's death, the shift in Garrett became more pronounced and more specific. He began making comments about the house. Not egregiously, not with the bluntness of a person who has given up pretense, but in the particular way of someone who wants an outcome and is trying to arrange the conversation around it without quite saying the thing directly. He suggested at a Sunday dinner that, at some point, it might make sense for Howard and me to think about downsizing a smaller property, something more manageable, something in a community that would provide more support. The house, he noted, was a lot of upkeep for 2 people. Howard listened to this without expression. When Garrett finished, Howard said, "The house is fine. Thank you for thinking about us." The subject was closed. Garrett raised it twice more over the following year in different formulations. Howard closed it each time in the same quiet, definitive way. The comments about Howard's finances began about 18 months before his death, in the period when his health was visibly declining, and the question of what came after had a weight and immediacy it had not had before. Garrett began making what I can only describe as assessments. At a family dinner, he said, addressing Howard, but in the particular way of someone who is also addressing a room, "Dad, with the house, and whatever savings you've built up, the estate's going to be straightforward to handle. Nothing complicated. Claire and I can work through it without any problems." Howard looked at him. "Philip handles the estate," Howard said. "He knows what he's doing." "Of course," Garrett said. "I just mean it shouldn't be complicated. It's not like there's a complex portfolio or anything." He laughed. Howard did not laugh. He said, "Philip handles it." The conversation moved on. I watched my husband's face after that dinner when we were alone in the kitchen. He was washing a cup. We had a dishwasher, but Howard hand-washed his own coffee cups, a habit from his mother, and his face had the expression of a man who has arrived at a conclusion he has been approaching for some time. "He thinks he knows what's here," Howard said. "Yes," I said. "He's wrong," Howard said. "I know," I said. Howard set the cup in the drying rack. "Philip's appointment is Thursday," he said. "I'm going to make some adjustments." He didn't tell me what the adjustments were. He went to see Philip on Thursday, and came home, and we had dinner, and watched the news, and he went to bed, and I read for another hour, and neither of us mentioned the Thursday appointment again. I didn't ask. I trusted him, completely. I had trusted him for 51 years, and I was not going to stop in the last year of his life, 14 months before Howard died. A Sunday dinner, Garrett and Tiffany Claire and Marcus Howard and me. It was on the surface a perfectly pleasant dinner. Good food. I had made the chicken that Howard liked with the lemon and the herbs, good wine. The ordinary conversation of a family gathering Garrett's work, Claire's students, the grandchildren, Nina and Bea, who were not present but were referenced repeatedly. The conversation shifted, as it sometimes did in that period, to Howard's health. He was managing, the medication was working. The cardiologist was cautiously optimistic, but the reality of his condition was present in the room in the way it always was by then. And then Garrett said, in the voice he uses when he is deploying what he believes to be gentle pragmatism, "Dad, Mum, I just want to say that Tiffany and I are here for whatever you need. When the time comes, whenever that is, we want to make sure things go smoothly. We've talked about it and we're ready to step up." Howard looked at him pleasantly. "We appreciate that," Howard said. "I just want you to know," Garrett said, "that we're thinking about it, about what makes sense. Obviously, the priority is whatever's best for Mum after. She'll have the house and whatever savings are there, and we'll make sure she's set up." He said, "She'll have the house and whatever savings are there," in the specific tone of a man summarizing what he already considers established fact. It was at this moment that I said not planning to not as a strategy, just as the true thing. "Your father has worked very hard over many years. The estate is more substantial than you might expect." Garrett looked at me, and then he laughed. It was not a mean laugh. He would not have recognized it as unkind. It was the laugh of a man who is being gently indulgent of someone else's self-impression. "Mum," he said, "I know you and Dad have been careful. I'm sure there's something there. But let's be realistic. You've got the house. You don't have to pretend there's some fortune hidden somewhere." He said, "Let's be realistic," the way people say it when they mean, "Let me correct your misapprehension." He said, "You don't have to pretend," the way people say it when they mean, "I'm allowing for your dignity while making clear I'm not deceived." Howard said nothing. I said nothing. Tiffany smiled at her wineglass. Claire was very still in the way that Claire is still when something has happened that she is noting but not responding to. Garrett moved on to a different topic. I looked at Howard across the table. He looked back at me. His face said nothing in the way his face said nothing when something had been understood and did not need to be discussed. 14 months later, he died. 7 months after the dinner table laugh, he had gone to see Philip. I did not learn until the Thursday afternoon in March in the conference room exactly what he had done there. But sitting at that dinner table watching my son laugh at the idea of a fortune we were supposedly imagining, I understood in the particular way that 51 years of marriage teaches you to understand a person that Howard had seen it too, and that Howard, in his quiet and methodical way, had already handled it. Howard's last year. I will not dwell in it heavily because this story is not about grief. There is grief in it, real and bone deep, the kind that is still present every morning when I reach for the coffee, and there is only one cup to make. But the grief is not the story. The story is what Howard built and what he intended and what happened when his intentions were finally clearly read in a conference room in downtown Phoenix. What I will tell you about the final year is the pattern of Garrett's behavior during it. He visited more. He called more. He asked on several occasions whether Howard had thought about various arrangements, whether Howard had considered adding Garrett's name to certain accounts for administrative ease, whether it might make sense to simplify some of the financial holdings ahead of time, whether a conversation with a financial advisor of Garrett's choosing might be useful. Howard declined all of these suggestions with the patient consistency that characterized his declinations of everything he had decided against. Polite, clear, final. Garrett began at some point in the last 6 months, referring to the estate in the future tense. Not to Howard, or to me, to others, apparently. Claire told me in a quiet phone call after one family visit that Garrett had mentioned to her in passing that he was thinking about the house and whether it made more sense to sell it or hold it. "The house," Claire said. "He said the house, like it was already his." "Yes," I said. "Mum," Claire said. "I know," I said. "Does Dad know?" I thought about Howard at the dinner table, Howard in his chair reading, Howard washing his coffee cup at the sink saying he's wrong about the estate, saying Philip handles it. Dad knows, I said. Is it going to be okay? She asked. Yes, I said. I promise you it is. I didn't tell her why I was certain, but I was certain. The day Howard died, the Tuesday in November, the newspaper in the kitchen, the garden, I was the one who found him. He had gone quietly the way he did things, with the newspaper folded neatly in his lap and his coffee cup on the table beside him. He had been reading an article about bridge construction, which was the kind of thing Howard read on Tuesday mornings. I sat with him for a little while before I called anyone. I told him things I will keep to myself. Then I called Claire. Then I called the paramedics. Garrett arrived that evening from Scottsdale. Tiffany was with him. They were appropriately sorrowful, genuinely so, I believe. Whatever Garrett's complications, he had loved his father in the way that complicated people love parents they respect. In the days that followed, as arrangements were made and family came and went, and the specific bureaucracy of death was attended to, Garrett asked once on the second day, carefully, whether I knew what the arrangements were. Meaning the estate. Meaning Philip. Meaning what was coming. Philip will contact us with an appointment, I said. Of course, Garrett said. Of course. He said of course twice, which is what he does when he is accepting something he has already incorporated into his planning. 4 months later, we were at the conference room. Philip opened the folder, and the number was read. And the silence happened. And then the dispositions were read. And then there was a different silence. Philip closed the folder. He set it on the table in front of him and looked at the room with the measured calm of a man who has done this before and understands that the next several minutes will contain a range of human responses, and that his role is to be steady regardless of what form they take. Garrett said, "That's it." "That's the full disposition of the estate," Philip said. "Yes." "Everything goes to Mom." "Mrs. Kellerman receives all assets outright," Philip said. "That's correct." Garrett looked at me. "Mom," he said, obviously there are arrangements to be made between the family. Dad would have wanted. Your father's wishes are in the document," Philip said gently, but with the practiced firmness of someone who has heard this construction before. "Mrs. Kellerman has full discretion over all assets." "But obviously," Garrett tried again. "The will is very clear," Philip said. "It was carefully considered and precisely drafted. There is no ambiguity." Tiffany, who had been silent, said, "Is there a previous will, a version that—" "The current will supersedes all previous instruments," Philip said. "It was executed 18 months before Mr. Kellerman's death, and modified in certain respects approximately 7 months before his death. Both the original and the modification were executed with full legal formality. 7 months before his death. The Thursday appointment. The one Howard had gone to alone after Garrett's dinner table laugh. The adjustments he had made without telling me what they were. I thought about that Thursday. About Howard coming home. About the ordinary dinner and the evening news and the night that followed. He had gone to Philip, and he had made certain. He had been until the very end the most thorough and most patient man I had ever known. Claire, across the table, was very still. Her hands were still folded. Her face still revealed nothing. But her eyes, when they met mine, briefly contained something I recognized as I knew it. I knew he would have taken care of it. Garrett said, "I'd like to see the document." Philip slid a copy across the table. Garrett read it. Not quickly, carefully, the way he reviews financial documents, searching for the thing that opens a different door. There was no different door. Howard had not left one. Garrett set the document down. He looked at me, and I looked at him. And I thought about a dinner table 14 months ago, and a laugh, and the words, "Mom, you don't have to pretend there's some fortune hidden somewhere." I said nothing. There was nothing to say. Howard had already said everything. Before I tell you what happened after Philip closed the folder, I want to tell you about what Howard actually built. Not the dollar amount, I've given you that, but the how. The specific, patient, undramatic how of a man who spent 30 years building something extraordinary without ever making it the subject of a conversation. Howard started investing in 1982. He was 35 years old. We had been married 11 years. The children were young. Garrett was 9. Claire was 7. And we were not wealthy. We were comfortable in the way of a 2-income household, with a paid-off car and a mortgage, and enough in savings to feel that we were not precarious, but we were not people who thought of themselves as investors. Howard thought of himself as an investor. He had been reading quietly since his 20s. Graham, Buffett, Fisher. The specific canon of long-term value investing that rewards patience and penalizes urgency. He had been following markets in the newspapers. Howard was a newspaper man his entire life and building an understanding of what money does when it is left alone to do it, which is to say compound. He opened his first brokerage account in 1982 with $3,000, $3,000. The equivalent adjusted for inflation of approximately $9,500 today. Not a grand gesture, a deliberate beginning. He added to it consistently without fail through every economic cycle of the following 40 years. Recessions, market crashes, the dot-com collapse 2008. He added to it every quarter, bought more when prices fell. Reinvested. Every dividend changed nothing except the size of the contributions as his income grew. He never withdrew. He never speculated. He never deviated from the plan. The Mesa rental property was a 2004 opportunity he recognized as sound and acted on without extended deliberation, which was Howard's way. Identify the clear thing, do the clear thing, move on. For 30 years, he said nothing about any of it, except in the most general terms. Not because he was hiding it, because he was building it. Because the thing about Howard was that he understood the difference between a work in progress and a completed thing, and he did not present works in progress to audiences. He waited until they were done. When his diagnosis prompted him to begin the Sunday afternoon sessions, the careful transfer of financial knowledge to me, I asked him why he had said so little about it for so long. I didn't want to make it the subject of family conversations, he said. Money changes conversations. I watched it in other families. I didn't want it here. But Garrett, I started. Yes, he said. Garrett knew we weren't poor. He didn't know how much. I was deliberate about that. Why? Howard was quiet for a moment. Because, he said, I wanted to know who my children were without the money as a variable. I wanted their relationship with us to be what it was without that in the equation. I sat with this. And what did you learn? I said. He looked at me. Enough, he said. I learned enough. The Thursday appointment, the modifications 7 months before his death, I understood what he had done there. He had removed Garrett's name from a specific provision in the original will that had allocated a percentage of the investment portfolio to both children equally. He had made me the sole beneficiary. He had trusted me to take it from there. In the conference room on that Thursday afternoon in March, listening to Philip read the dispositions, I felt the full weight of Howard's trust in me. And I felt the full weight of what it meant that he had made that trust complete. He had removed the obligation. He had removed the structure. He had left it entirely to me, because he knew me. And because he had, over the last 5 years, watched what there was to watch, and known what there was to know. And because he trusted my judgment. The specific quality of being trusted like that, completely without safety nets, without conditions, is one of the most overwhelming things that has ever happened to me. It is also one of the most clarifying. Garrett called me the evening of the Thursday appointment. I had driven home alone, as I had driven there alone, and was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea when my phone rang. I had expected this call. I had thought about what I would say. Mum, he said. He had the voice of a man who has spent several hours recalibrating. Garrett, I said. I want to talk about today, he said. All right, I said. He started. Stopped. The recalibration was happening in real time. I didn't expect the numbers to be what they were. I know, I said. Dad never said he never gave any indication. Your father was a private person about his finances, I said. He always was. But 2.7 million, Mum, that's not nothing. No, I said. It isn't. A pause. And it all goes to you, he said. That's what the will says, I said. Which means... He paused again, working toward the thing he actually wanted to say. Which means you'll be distributing it, at some point. Between us. I noted the between us, the assumption embedded in it. I have full discretion, I said. That's what the will says. Of course, he said. Of course. I just want to make sure you're thinking about what makes sense. For the family. For all of us. I'm thinking about it, I said. I'll take the time I need to think about it properly. Is there? Mum, is there anything I should know about how Dad was thinking about things before, about what he intended? I held this question for a moment. Howard's intentions were in the will. The will gave me complete discretion. Howard's intentions in giving me complete discretion were not a message for Garrett. They were a trust extended to me. Your father's intentions are in the document, I said. Philip can answer questions about the legal provisions. But personally, Garrett said, what he said to you, what he wanted me to use my judgment, I said. A long pause. Okay, Garrett said. I love you, I said. Because I did. Because he was my son, and love and clarity about a person's behavior are not mutually exclusive. I love you too, Mum, he said in a voice that was slightly more subdued than usual. We hung up. I sat with my tea. I thought about Howard. I thought about what he had said about knowing enough. I thought about Claire, who had driven back to Flagstaff that afternoon, and who had called me from the road, just checking in, she said, just wanting to hear my voice. I thought about Nina and B. Claire's daughters, who called me Grandma Viv, and who had drawn me a picture the previous Christmas that was supposedly of me in the garden, and that looked more like a purple explosion, but that was currently on my refrigerator. I thought about a structural engineer from Phoenix who had opened a brokerage account in 1982 with $3,000 and never talked about it, and never deviated from the plan and compounded it for 40 years. I took out a legal pad, and I started writing. I want to tell you what I decided. Not as a story of revenge, not as the instrument of Howard's posthumous punishment of Garrett. I want to be very clear about the frame I operated in, because the frame matters. Howard had given me complete discretion, because he trusted me, not because he wanted me to execute a sentence. What I did with the estate was my decision made from my own values, informed by my own 30 years of watching my family and understanding what I knew. I talked to Philip several times over 3 months. I talked to my own financial advisor. I talked to a therapist I had begun seeing after Howard's death. A woman named Dr. Anand, who was patient and precise, and who asked excellent questions about what I actually wanted, rather than what I thought was expected of me. I talked to Claire. I want to be honest about that. I talked to Claire. Not to tell her what I was deciding, or to get her approval, the decision was mine, but because Claire is a person I trust, and thinking aloud with someone you trust clarifies things in a way that thinking alone doesn't always. I did not talk to Garrett. Over 3 months, I arrived at the following. The house on Camelback. I would remain in it for as long as I chose. It was my home. Howard had built the kitchen cabinets himself in 1997, and I was not leaving because the square footage exceeded what one person technically needed. Eventually, when I chose, I would sell it. The proceeds would go into the family trust I was establishing. I had decided on a trust structure with Philip's help for my grandchildren. The investment portfolio and the Mesa property, I would preserve and grow them during my lifetime, drawing on them as needed for my own life, and at my death, they would be distributed according to the trust terms. The trust terms. This is the part that matters. I established 4 beneficiary shares. Nina and B. Claire's daughters received 2 shares between them, equal portions held until each reached 25 years of age. I also established a charitable giving provision. Howard had, in the last year of his life, become deeply interested in a scholarship program at Arizona State University that supported first-generation college students who were the first in their families to pursue higher education, who did not have the financial cushions that families like ours had built. He had donated to it anonymously twice. I made a significant contribution to this program, a gift that Howard would have made himself, I'm completely certain, had he had more time. And Garrett received a gift. A real one, not a token. I have spent a great deal of time thinking about how to describe this decision, because I don't want you to hear it as either cruelty or sentimentality. Garrett is my son. I love him. He made choices in the last years of his father's life that I found painful to witness the calibration, the assessments, the dinner table laugh. But those choices were themselves the product of who he had become, which was itself the product of forces not entirely under his control, including a father who had been perhaps too private, and a mother who had perhaps not named what she saw as clearly as she might have. People are not simply their worst moments. I gave Garrett a gift, a real substantial gift, enough to represent that I see him as my son, not as an adversary, not as someone to be punished, not as the sum of the things he did in the years of his father's decline. But not the amount he expected. Not a half share of $2.7 million. Not the controlling voice in what happened to what Howard built. That was not going to happen. Not because Howard didn't love Garrett. He did love him. He loved him clearly and without illusion, which is a more honest love than the kind that avoids seeing clearly. But because what Garrett had been reaching for was not his, had never been his, and giving it to him would not have taught him anything he needed to learn, would not have served the grandchildren who needed it, would not have honored the scholarship students Howard had found meaningful, would not have been true to what I knew was right. I am a woman who spent 30 years in oncology. I have sat beside more than enough people at the end of their lives to know with some authority what matters and what doesn't. What matters is not the amount, it is what it does. It is who it serves. It is whether the decision behind it is true. My decision was true. Philip filed the trust documents in June. Garrett found out about the trust terms in August, when Philip notified him of the gift and the overall structure. He called me that evening. The call was different from the one in March. The March call had been careful, calibrated the call of a man trying to navigate something he didn't fully understand yet. This call had the quality of something dropped. The carefulness gone, the calibration gone, just Garrett raw in a way I had not heard from him in a very long time. "Mum," he said, "I've heard from Philip." "I know," I said. "You gave the portfolio to the grandchildren." "I established a trust for Nina and Bea," I said. "They will receive it when they're adults." "Yes." "And the scholarship?" "Yes." "And what I'm getting is," he said the number. "Yes," I said. A silence. "Mum, that's less than 10%. "I know," I said. "Dad's estate what he built, and I'm getting less than 10%. "Yes," I said. "Why?" he said. Just that. Just the word. I had thought about this question, not strategically, not about how to weaponize the answer, but genuinely, what do I say when my son asks me why? The honest answer was long and would not fit into a phone call and might not be fully received, even if it had the time it deserved. But I could say the part of it that was true and that he could hear. "Because," I said, "your father worked for 40 years. He was careful and patient, and he never spent what he built. He did it for us, for our family. And when I looked at what to do with it, I thought about what would actually serve the family best. Nina and Bea are children. A foundation when they're adults will change their lives in ways that money at this stage of yours won't change yours." "That's not," he started. "And your father," I said quietly, "made the estate mine, completely mine. He trusted my judgment. I'm using it." Silence. "Mum," Garrett said, and there was something in his voice that I had not heard since he was very young. A rawness, a deflation, the sound of someone for whom something expected has not arrived. "I thought Dad would have wanted—" "Your father's will says what he wanted," I said. He wanted me to decide. I've decided. A very long silence, then quietly. Did he know about the amount? Was this his idea? The will gives me discretion, I said. The decisions are mine. But he knew, Garrett said. Not a question, an understanding arriving. I didn't answer, because the answer was yes. Howard knew. Howard, who had watched the dinner table and the calibrated visits and the comments about simplifying the holdings, who had said, "He's wrong," in the kitchen, and gone to Philip on a Thursday and made modifications, Howard knew. But I was not going to say that. Not because it wasn't true, but because saying it would make the conversation about Howard and Garrett about the score of a relationship that was more complicated than any verdict. And that conversation was not mine to have. This is my decision, I said, made with my full judgment and my full love for this family. Garrett was quiet for a long time. I need to think, he said finally. Take the time you need, I said. Mum, he said just before hanging up. His voice had changed again, quieter, less certain, younger somehow. Do you think I deserve this? What you did? I thought about this for a real moment, a genuine moment of sitting with the question as the question it was. I think, I said slowly, that what you deserved has very little to do with money, and I think what I did has very little to do with what you deserved. I did what I thought was right for the family and for your father's memory, and for your brothers, your sister's children. And for me, he said. And for you, I said. What I gave you was real. It's real, Garrett. Silence. Okay, he said. We hung up. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. I thought about Howard washing the coffee cup at the sink. I thought about 30 years of newspapers and patience and compounding. I thought about $3,000 in 1982. Thank you, I said to the kitchen to Howard, to the 40 years of a life built carefully. Then I went to the garden. There was still planting to do. Claire found out about the trust structure the same week Garrett did. Philip notified her of the portion established for Nina and Bea as required. She called me within 20 minutes of receiving Philip's letter. Mum, she said, and in her voice was something that was not what I expected. Not relief, not satisfaction, not the particular quality of someone who has been vindicated. Something more complicated. Hi, sweetheart, I said. Mum, this is a lot. I know, I said. For Nina and Bea, she said. This changes, Mum. This changes everything for them. When they're adults, the things they'll be able to do. That's why I did it, I said. A pause. And the scholarship, she said. I read about it. Dad donated to it anonymously, didn't he? Twice, I said. I heard her breath catch slightly. He never said anything, she said. No, I said. He wouldn't have. That's so. She stopped. That's exactly him. I know, I said. Mum, she said after a moment. Can I ask you something? Of course. Did you know about the money, about what Dad had built, before Philip's reading? This was a fair question. I had thought about it. I knew there was more than Garrett expected, I said. I didn't know the specific amount until Philip's reading. Your father showed me the accounts after his diagnosis. He wanted me to understand the full picture, but I hadn't been tracking the specific values. So you knew there was something. I knew your father had been patient for 40 years, and that patience like that tends to compound into something real, I said. Claire was quiet. And Garrett, she said carefully, he didn't know. No, I said, because Dad kept it private. Your father believed, I said, that money changes conversations. He didn't want it to. But it did anyway, Claire said quietly, at least for Garrett. Yes, I said. It did. She was quiet for a long moment. I don't feel triumphant, she said finally. I thought I might, if it ever came to this. But I don't. I just feel sad. For what Garrett missed. The relationship he could have had with Dad, without the other thing. I sat with this. Claire, who is the daughter who calls on Sundays and reads to her children and drives the Honda with a dent in the quarter panel and does not perform anything. I know, I said. Is he going to be okay? She asked. Eventually, I said. He has time to become who he wants to be. He's 42, not 67. He has time. Are you going to help him get there? She said. I already have, I said. I gave him a real gift. The rest is his. Okay, she said. And Claire, I said. Yeah. Your father loved you, I said. I want you to know that he knew exactly who you were and loved exactly that person. I think you know that. But I wanted to say it. She was quiet for a moment. I know, she said. Good, I said. We talked for another hour about Nina's new school year and Bee's obsession with a particular book series and Marcus's furniture business, which had had a good summer. Ordinary things. The texture of a life. Garrett called me in November, 3 months after August. The first call that was not about the estate, not about Philip, not about the trust structure. A Sunday afternoon call, which is not something Garrett had ever particularly done, the Sunday call, that was not his habit. Mum, he said, how are you? Just that. Just how are you? I noticed. I'm well, I said. I planted the winter vegetables last week. Your father's garlic is in. He did love his garlic, Garrett said. He did, I said. We talked for 20 minutes, about nothing in particular, about Howard's garlic and a project Garrett was working on, and a dinner he and Tiffany had been to. Normal things. The kind of things that families talk about when they are talking to each other, rather than around something. At the end of the call, Garrett said, Mum, I've been doing some thinking. I know, I said. I can hear it. A slight pause. I was angry, he said. After August. I was really angry. That's understandable, I said. Not just about the money, he said. About realizing that Dad knew, that he'd seen what I'd been doing, how I'd been thinking about things. He was quiet for a moment. That was harder than the money, he said. I let this sit. Your father loved you, I said. He knew you completely and loved you completely. Those two things are not opposites. I know, he said. I'm figuring that out. Good, I said. I want to come for Thanksgiving, he said, if that's okay. It's always okay, I said. You're always my son. That doesn't have a condition. A long pause. Thanks, Mom, he said. Bring the good wine, I said. Your father would have wanted the good wine. A surprised sound, almost a laugh. Okay, he said. I'll bring the good wine. Thanksgiving. Both children, both spouses. Nina and Bee, who arrived in the particular explosion of energy that 9- and 6-year-olds bring to the world, and who immediately began a thorough investigation of the house's corners and cabinets in the way of children who know a space well enough to be comfortable in it. Garrett and Tiffany came. Garrett walked in the door, carrying 2 bottles of wine. Very good wine, the kind his father would have approved of, and hugged me for a moment before setting them on the counter. Tiffany, who had been carefully neutral in the months since August, was present in a way she sometimes isn't, not performing warmth, but making a visible effort to be in the room to engage with Claire and Marcus, to sit with Nina and Bee, and show the interest that small children reliably reward. The dinner was Howard's garlic in the roasted vegetables, Howard's carving set on the turkey, Howard's chair at the end of the table, which I had left as it was, because I was not ready to move it, and no one suggested I should. At some point during dinner, Nina, who is 9, and who asks every question that occurs to her with complete confidence that it is welcome, said, Grandma Viv, who sits in that chair. The table quieted slightly. Your grandfather used to sit there, I said. Nina considered this. Should we put something in it? She said. So it's not empty. Like what? Bee asked. I don't know, Nina said. His hat. This made Garrett laugh. The real laugh, the one I recognized from when he was young, the one that doesn't calculate anything. Dad didn't wear a hat, he said. He wore a baseball cap in the garden, I said. Get the cap, Claire said. I got the cap. It sat on Howard's chair for the rest of the dinner. It sounds like a small thing. It is not a small thing. It is the kind of thing that a family does together, the kind of ordinary ritual that creates a tissue of shared memory and shared affection that does not depend on any one person's behavior in the years of someone's decline. Garrett looked at the hat on the chair for a moment, and then looked at me, and then looked at his plate. He said nothing. He didn't need to say anything. I want to tell you something about Howard, something that I have thought about many times since March, since August, since the November Sunday call, since Thanksgiving, and the baseball cap. Howard did not modify his will as an act of revenge. I want to be very clear about this, because I know that some people will hear this story and think Howard saw his son's behavior and punished him for it. And that reading is available, it's right there on the surface, and it is not entirely wrong. But it is not the full picture. Howard modified his will because he trusted me. That is the whole thing, really. He trusted me enough to give me complete discretion. He trusted my judgment about what would serve the family. He trusted my love for both children to be a reliable instrument. And he also, I believe, completely hoped that what followed would not be punishment. He hoped it would be an opportunity for Garrett to encounter at 42 years old a real consequence of who he had been choosing to be, not a consequence designed to destroy him, a consequence designed to make him think. Because Howard he always believed that people are capable of becoming more than they currently are. He had watched his own father, a difficult man in many ways, become gentler in his final decade. He had watched students at his firm who arrived as middling engineers and grew into excellent ones. He believed in growth. He believed that a person at 42 is not finished. I believe this too. And so what I did, the trust, the scholarship, the real gift to Garrett that was smaller than he expected, was not punishment. It was in the truest sense I can find clarification. A clear, undeniable, legally documented clarification of where things actually stood, of what Howard had actually built, of what was valuable, of what would last. Garrett is 42 years old. He has time to build something of his own. He makes a great deal of money. He has a partner who is capable of genuine connection when she chooses to offer it. He has a mother who loves him without conditions. He has a sister who will welcome him. He has nieces who would put a baseball cap on an empty chair for his father. He has everything he needs to become who he should be. What he does with it is his. I am 67 years old in a house with garlic in the ground and a baseball cap on a chair and $2.7 million that my husband built quietly, patiently over 40 years, which is now mine to steward in the time I have left. I think about Howard every morning. I think about $3,000 in 1982. I think about the patience of it, the faith of it, the specific beauty of a person who believes that what you do consistently without drama for a very long time will eventually become something real. It will. I am the evidence. It is summer. The garden is in full production. Howard's garlic harvested in June, the tomatoes coming in, now the herbs I have been growing for 20 years, doing what they do. The house is mine. The trust is established. The documents filed, the scholarship contribution made in Howard's name, the first time the Kellerman name has been publicly attached to anything which I think Howard would have found both appropriate and slightly embarrassing in the way he found public recognition embarrassing. Nina, who turned 10 in April, received a letter from the trust administrator explaining that there is a trust in her name that she will receive at 25. She called me the day she received it, which she found in an envelope addressed specifically to her with her name on the outside. "Grandma Viv," she said, "I got a letter from a lawyer." "I know," I said. "It says there's money for me," she said. "Yes," I said. "For when I'm 25, she said. "Yes," I said. "That's 15 years, she said with the mathematical directness of a child who does mental arithmetic as a reflex. "It is," I said. "Is it from Grandpa Howard?" she said. I thought about this. "It's from your grandfather and me," I said. "He built it. I'm the one who decided to put it in your name, so it's from both of us." She was quiet for a moment. Grandma Viv, she said, what should I do with it when I'm 25? Whatever you decide to do, I said. It's a foundation, not an instruction. What you build on it is yours. She thought about this seriously. I think I want to be a doctor, she said. Or maybe an engineer. I haven't decided. Either one is excellent, I said. Okay, she said. I'll figure it out. I know you will, I said. She went back to whatever 9-year-olds do on summer afternoons. I sat in Howard's garden, a structural engineer from Phoenix who opened a brokerage account in 1982 with $3,000 and believed in what compounds over time. His garlic was in the ground this spring. It came up as it always did without being asked to. Patient, reliable, real. Here is what I want to ask you, because there are several questions embedded in this story and I want to lay them out clearly and ask you to think about them. Really think, not just react. The first question is about money and family. Howard kept his finances private for 40 years. He did not disclose the full scope of what he built to his children. He believed that money changes conversations, and he did not want it to change his. Was he right? On one hand, his privacy protected his family from decades of the dynamic that eventually emerged anyway. In the years of his decline, the calibration, the assessments, the dinner table laugh. His children grew up in a household where they had to relate to their parents as people rather than as assets. On the other hand, the privacy created a gap. Garrett made financial assumptions based on incomplete information and then faced a reckoning in a conference room at 62 years old. Could more transparency have produced a different outcome? Could Garrett have been different if he had known I don't know the answer? Howard had reasons I respect, but I sit with the question. The second question is about what I did. I gave Garrett a gift real substantial less than he expected. Was that the right call? Some of you will say he got what he deserved less. He showed who he was in the years of Howard's decline and the estate reflected it. Some of you will say he's her son. He should have received a full equal share. Whatever his behavior, you don't do that to your child. Some of you will say I should have talked to him first, given him the chance to account for himself before making the decision. I thought about that last one carefully. I thought about whether a conversation with Garrett before the trust documents were filed would have changed what I did or what I gave him. I decided it wouldn't have, because the decision wasn't about his behavior in isolation. It was about what served the whole family best. And that calculation didn't require his input. It required my judgment. Was I right? I think so. But I hold the question. The third question, and this is the one that keeps me up sometimes, in the way of questions that don't resolve cleanly. What does Garrett do? Now he is 42 years old. He is capable of growth. I believe that completely the way Howard believed it. The Sunday call in November and the Thanksgiving and the baseball cap and the real laugh, those are evidence of something. But evidence of something is not evidence of everything. He has time. He has what I gave him. He has the family that will include him if he chooses to be includable. What he does with all of that is his. I cannot do it for him. Howard could not do it for him. The will gave me discretion, but it did not give me the ability to make my son into who I want him to be. No will can do that. Only he can. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you think about Howard's privacy about my decision about Garrett. Tell me what you would have done. Tell me about your own families, your own estates, your own secret wills and unexpected revelations. I read every comment. I'm Vivian. The garlic is in. The trust is filed. The baseball cap is on the chair. Howard would have liked how it turned out. I think so. I'm almost certain.